Hi, and welcome to NicheCraft. My name is Cassie, and I'm your host, and today we are going to be learning how to make a granny rectangle. I do have my granny square Sundays coming up, so you will get a granny square on Sunday, but I wanted to go ahead and do the granny rectangle because it's a really great way for a beginner to get a blanket under their belt. And it's also so pretty. You know, I had been crocheting for quite a while until I decided to make a granny rectangle blanket, and that's the one that was pictured. And I made that with Karen Simply Soft, and my cat is on there. And I originally put him there so that you guys could see the you know how big it was, but then I wasn't able to fit it in the picture, so of course you guys can't see, but it is the size of a queen size bed. I could have kept going, but at the time me and my husband had a queen size bed instead of a king, so I just went ahead and left it there. Now my daughter uses it on her bed, but yeah, it's so soft, it's great, and since it's rectangle, you can just keep going around and around, and the width is shorter than the length, so it ends up making a nice blanket size. Now, of course, you can keep going around the traditional granny square and end up making a square blanket if that's what you'd like, or a square piece of fabric. But for those of you who would prefer to make a rectangle blanket, but you still like that granny square stitch, we've got a tutorial. So I'm going to be starting this tutorial in just a minute. Now, I did leave the reference on the picture in my thumbnail, but I don't think it's big enough for you guys to see, so I just wanted to make sure you guys knew that that was taken from crochetagain.com. It is a free image for people who want to learn how to make granny rectangle from that diagram, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that that's where I got it. It was not something that I created myself. Anyway, to start with the granny rectangle, we are going to chain up 24 chains, okay? So I'm using an eye hook with the 4-weight yarn that I'm working with. I typically use an eye hook or a J hook depending on what kind of yarn I use. Some yarns that are in the 4-weight category feel a little bit thicker, so that one I'll go up to a J. So all I can tell you is to use the yarn weight and hook of that's recommended, or the one that's most comfortable to you. All right. So go ahead and pause the video, chain 24, and then come back and we will start with the first row. Okay. So the first row, and let me go ahead and zoom in here so you can see really clearly exactly which chain to go into. So on the first row, you are going to double crochet into the 6th chain from the hook. So that's not this one, that's the one that's on the hook, okay? What you're going to do is you're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you want, you can put your thumb on that when you pick it up. That way you'll be sure to not lose your place, okay? You double crochet by yarning over, putting your hook through that loop that you identified as a 6th one. Okay, and I'm being, you know, I'm making sure that I'm telling you guys every single step for those of you who this might be your first tutorial. Now you pull a loop through, okay? So now you have 3 loops on your hook. Okay? Then you pull a loop through the first 2. Then you pull a loop through the second 2, and now you have double crocheted 1 into this chain. What we're going to do now, though, to make the granny cluster, which is typically 3 double crochets together, is we're going to go yarn over and go back into that same loop, and we're going to make 2 more double crochets by pulling up a loop, pulling through 2, and then pulling through 2 again, yarning over, putting this hook into that same chain space, pulling up a loop, pulling through 2, and pulling through 2 again. And this is your first of 7 granny clusters that you're going to be making on this chain. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to skip the next 2 stitches. So skip, skip, then you yarn over and you put 3 double crochets into that next stitch. Okay, so 1, 2, and 3. So now that we've got that down with this zoomed in, I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see the bigger picture. And we're going to continue doing the same pattern until the end of the chain. So you skip, skip, and then you double crochet 3 times into that third chain. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And my cats are being very rowdy today. I'm not certain why, so any weird noises, that's them playing with their toys. Alright, so you skip 2 more, and then you put 3 double crochets into the next one. And again, those of you who want to fast forward to the point where I am done with this row, you'll have a total of 7 of these granny clusters when you're done. Okay? Go back in the loop 2 more times to double crochet those 3 double crochets. You skip 2 again, then you put 3 double crochets into that next chain space. Okay, so there's the third one. And I'm going to look, right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those, so I have 2 more to do. Skip 2, double crochet into that third one right there. And then I'm going to double crochet 2 more times. So you always put 3 double crochets into your granny square clusters on this pattern. There's one exception to that, but I will talk about it when we get there. Okay, skip 2 more, and in that last chain, you're going to put 3 double crochets into that last chain. This yarn is really pretty and everything, but it splits sometimes, so I apologize for that. If it's distracting in this tutorial, I don't mean for it to be. I just want to use this yarn up. Alrighty, so we are done with the first row, and it's looking really pretty. Okay, probably doesn't look like it's going to turn into a granny square or rectangle, but you will see that it actually does. So now that we're done, we are going to chain 6. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you chain 6 at the end of that first row. All right, and this is why you do that. When you turn your work, because we're making a rectangle, you're going to be working back into these right here. So watch this. I'm going to turn it, and now this forms the same loop on this side. And that's where you're going to work in your next, or the technical first round, but it will actually be the third row that you work, okay? So you chain 3. And then what you do is you slip stitch into this, the first chain on your last granny square cluster. Okay, so you slip stitch there, and what you do is that you chain 2. Now this is going to probably look a little awkward for you at first, but it will stop looking awkward once we complete the round. Okay, so what you do next is that you yarn over. You go underneath these 2 chains that we skipped before, okay? And you pull up a loop. And then you pull through 2, and then you pull through 2 again, and that is your first double crochet in your first cluster of round 2, okay? So again, you go under that, you yarn over, go under that, pull up a loop, pull through 2, pull through 2 again, and now you have your second, and you're gonna make that third one just like normal. Again, this chain 2 thing right here is going to look a little bit weird, but we're going to fix that when we come back around, okay? In between these clusters, you do not have to chain at all. You yarn over and then go underneath that next chain 2 space that we worked into, or that we skipped before, and you're going to make another granny square cluster of 3 double crochets. All right. Okay, you're going to yarn over and do that one more time. And you're going to just keep going down this row until you have, I believe it will be, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So until you have 7 on this row too. Okay. So if you want to fast forward when I have that down, what I'll do is I'll just put down my work when I'm ready for the next round. But those of you who want to follow along with me, I'm just going to go ahead and keep you here since this first round is not very long. Okay, so again, you go underneath those 2 chains that you skipped before, and you put a granny square cluster of 3 double crochets around that. You yarn over and you do the same thing. You don't have to chain in between clusters. You make 3 double crochets into this cluster, or into this chain. And you're going to yarn over and make 3 granny square clusters into this one. And currently we have 6. So our 7th one is going to go into this chain, because remember how we worked into the 6 from our hook. Well, this is going to go into that chain that we created there. So you are going to make you're going to make 3 clusters of double crochets, or sorry, not 3 clusters. We're going to make 3 double crochets into this chain space. Okay. All right, so for those of you who skipped ahead, we have our 7 clusters with that 7th cluster going into this chain space that we made before. Next, we are going to make our very first corner by chaining 2. And this is going to count as our first corner of that rectangle. Next, we're going to make 1 granny square cluster right here in between this is going to end up being our width. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 double crochets into that. Now we're going to chain 2 more because we're going to turn. Okay, and then we're going to make the next cluster into the same chain right here next to the one that we just made. So we're going to make 3 double crochets into that same space. Okay, and I'm going to lay this down and zoom in so you can see really clearly what we're doing here. Okay, so here is our granny rectangle. We've made a row basically of 1, and then we've made a row of 2, and now we're turning and we're making this right here, which on our regular granny square would look like this, right? We've made our cluster, chain 2, and then we put our cluster right back into that same space. So that's what we're doing here. This is the first corner of our granny rectangle, okay? And then this is our first cluster in that corner. And then we have another corner, and then we put another cluster back into here. And now what we're going to do is we are going to continue putting the granny square clusters in between the granny square clusters from before. We're going to double crochet 3 times in between those clusters from before. In this particular pattern, we're not going to chain between our clusters. Okay, and we're going to do that again. Got all 3 there. We're going to continue doing this until we reach that turning chain. And when I reach that turning chain, I'll go ahead and put down my work for those of you who want to fast forward. And for those of you who are still feeling a little uncomfortable and want to make sure that you're following with me, I'll go ahead and stay on camera for this as well, okay? So again, no chains in between these clusters. We just keep going. We go into the next one once we do our last cluster, okay? So we don't have to chain between these. Okay, now we go to the next cluster by yarning over and doing 3 more double crochets there. And I would like to make sure that you can see exactly what I'm doing, so I'm going to zoom out. I always do that in reverse. Have you noticed that? Every time I say I'm going to zoom in, I zoom out first and then I zoom back in. And then I just said I was going to zoom out. Okay, we're going to do this one right here. Okay, so now we have run into our next chain right here, and it looks a little weird, doesn't it? Yeah. So we should have, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We should have 8. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, this will be the 8th one, obviously. Okay, so what we do in this chain, and then this, and from here on out, it will just look like a regular granny square, only it'll be a granny rectangle. So what we do in this chain, and I'm going to zoom out even more so you guys can see how I'm making this, is that we yarn over and we put another cluster right here. Okay, there's 1, 2, 3. Now we need this chain to be really big because it's not going to just hold that cluster that we just made, but it's also going to hold the cluster at the very end, like right here, okay, where we chain 2 to make that corner, and then we turn the corner and we make 1 cluster into this end right here by double crocheting 3 times into the same chain. And this was a chain 6 from before. All right, now, sorry, that yarn split. Now we are going to make the next corner on our granny rectangle by chaining 2. Okay, and then we're going to go back into this same cluster right here. And I see an opportunity to hide this tail underneath this, so I'm going to go ahead and do that by not only chaining around that chain, but also chaining around that tail as well. So that's 1, 2. We actually just do 2, and here's why. Because we're going to slip stitch into the top of this turning chain right here, or this, and that is going to be that moment where now it is not. Now it is no longer looking awkward because that is the 3rd cluster for this. So let me go ahead and show you that again. Okay, so we've done our 2nd cluster into this turn right here. So we've made our 3rd side, okay? We had 2 sides before, then we made a 3rd side here, and this is our 4th side, okay? So we're about to complete this into a rectangle, and then we can just keep going around and around and around. So since we had chained up 2 but left it kind of standing all by itself over here, what we're going to do is we're going to put 2 double crochets here instead of 3. And this is the only time we do this, okay? Now we're going to just slip stitch into this 3rd one right here that was our chain up space from before, and we do that by putting your hook into the very top of that, pulling a loop through that, Okay, and then instead of doing anything else, we just pull that same loop through the last chain that we just made, or the last loop that we just had, right? So now we have our rectangle. This is going to be what we can then do the granny square around, only it's a rectangle. So you probably know what's going to be coming next. However, I just want to go ahead and continue with you. You chain up 2. Okay, just like normal. And what you're going to do now is that you are going to put 2, okay, 2 double crochets right here. All right next to that chain 2 space, and that counts as your first double crochet, second and third. You put it right in between that last kind of awkward looking chain and the next cluster, okay? And that's how we do that. Now, you don't have to chain in between your clusters in this granny rectangle unless you want to, okay? If you want to, then your pattern is going to be to chain 1 in between each one of these, if that's what you want to do, and that's fine. The pattern that I'm following, though, since it's from a specific website, I want to make sure that I follow it exactly. So I'm going to go ahead and follow the pattern here by just going into that next space right in between the previous granny squares. And I'm going to put 3 double crochets right here in between those 2. Okay? So I'm going to put 3 there, and then I'm going to continue on putting 3 double crochets in between each one of these granny squares until I get to this place right there, and I will meet you up there once we get into that corner space. I'll see you then. Hi, welcome back. So I went ahead and made 3 double crochets in between each one of these clusters until I came to the corner right here. And I want to go ahead and bring this granny square back in to go over something that's so fundamental, but it really helps to conceptualize this when you're working on your work. So every square has 4 sides and 4 corners, right? And the same is true for every rectangle, okay? And we're building up the sides and the corners, right? So in the previous row, this was a corner, and this was the first side, this was the second side, third and fourth, okay? So we're about to go into this corner and make our corner. We've been working on the sides, so now we're gonna make our corner. So we make our corner by doing another cluster right here, okay? So you go ahead and go in and you do 3 double crochets right here. So this cluster counts as this long side right there, okay? That's from that side. Now we are going to chain 2. Now we're going to turn it so that we work on this side, okay? And what you do when you make a corner is that you put a cluster in for one side, you chain 2 to make that corner, and then you put a cluster in for the next side into the same spot. Okay? So we're going to make another granny square cluster here, our 3 double crochets right here, right back into that same turn. Okay? Next, we need to make another cluster into the next square, into the next corner. So what we're going to do is we're going to double crochet 3 times here because we're building up the side of this width right here. So we go 1, 2, 3. So now our rectangle side for our width has 2 clusters in it instead of the 1 that we had before. And every single row we're going to add a cluster. Okay, so now we're going to chain 2 because we're still in that corner. We're going to turn, and we need to make the cluster that's going to count for this side now. So what we're going to do is we are going to do 3 double crochets again into that same corner, but this cluster is for this side, for the longer side. So 3 double crochets into that, and now we're back working on the side, and we do that by yarning over and making double crochets in between each one of the clusters before, from the row before, the round before. Okay, and we just continue doing this, and the pattern says not to make a chain in between these. If you want to make a chain in between them, that's fine, if that's what your style is. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to put clusters in between each one of these clusters until I get to this turn, okay? Because I want to walk you through another corner, okay? So that we can make sure that we're building our rectangle, okay? All right, I'll see you there. All right, guys, so I have made all of my clusters in between the clusters, and I'm here in this next corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue building up the length here by putting the last cluster of the length right in here, okay? And by doing that, I'm going to be double crocheting 3 times into this corner. Okay, so I'm done with the length of this, and I'm going to turn it, and now I'm going to chain 2 to make that corner here. Now I'm going to double crochet right back into that corner so that I can build up the sides of the width side of the rectangle. So there's 1. Okay, now I'm going to go into this corner to build up the width and add that 1 more cluster here. Okay, so I'm going to double crochet a cluster of 3 right here at the next corner. So now we have like the round before we had 1, and now we have 2 clusters. Next, I'm going to turn it and chain 2 to make the next corner. Okay, and now I'm going to double crochet 3 times into that corner right there. Okay, and now I have finished the round of the first, I've finished the first round, because this was technically a round, because we went all the way around. So how we deal with this right here is that we go up into the top chain of that chain 2, or 3 if that's what you chained, and we do a slip stitch by pulling the yarn through. And then instead of doing anything else, we just pull it through that last loop there again. And now we're ready for the 3rd round. So some of you probably have the pattern down and you know how to make this granny rectangle, and you're going to just go ahead and keep going. So I definitely understand that. I am going to stay here though with anybody who's still feeling a little uncertain, and we're going to do 1 more round. So before I begin that next round, I wanted to remind everybody that I do have a very nice giveaway up right now. I also have another giveaway coming soon. So I just wanted to remind everybody to go ahead and find that giveaway and enter it if you haven't already, because there's a lot of really nice things in that giveaway. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. For those of you who are comfortable enough to continue to move on, if you did, please like this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel as well. And when you do subscribe, and this goes to, for those of you who are already subscribed too, go ahead and hit that bell. That way we'll go ahead and send you a notification every single time we upload a video. Now, if you don't want to get a notification every time we upload a video, then don't hit the bell. But when you get the notifications, and you can be certain that every single giveaway that I host, you'll know about as soon as it goes up, so that you can get your entry in. Okay, so for those of you who are going to go ahead and part, thank you so much for watching my tutorial. I hope that it helped, and I hope that you make a beautiful, whatever it is you're going to make out of this granny rectangle pattern. For those of you who still need a little bit more help, I'm going to go ahead and chain 2. And now we're going to go back in between those, and I'm going to put 2 double crochets right there, because I want to make sure that this cluster gets done right here. So we have our first granny square cluster. The chain 2 counts as that first double crochet, and then we have 2 double crochets in the same spot to make our first cluster for the round. Okay, and if you want to chain up 3 instead, if that is your preferred height, go ahead and do that. I always chain up 2 for my double crochets. So next we're going to go in between each one of these clusters on this side and build up this side. Now, something that is interesting that makes this granny square or the granny rectangle grow as we go to each round is that when we come to the corners, we add 1 more cluster for each side in it. So when I come to the end of this, I'm going to add another cluster right here in the corner. Then I'm going to make the next corner. And then here, I'm going to add the first cluster, the second cluster, and then 1 more cluster here in this next corner. So that's how it gets bigger. That might be intuitive for most of you, but I just want to make sure I'm covering all kinds of different learners. So I'm going to yarn over and make another granny square cluster by double crocheting 3 times in between each one of these, and I will meet you back when I am at the end of this and ready to go into this corner. We can make the corner together. All right, see you then. Alright guys, so I have made my clusters all the way across, and when I came to this corner, I made that last cluster right in that corner. Now I'm going to turn my work because I'm ready to make the next corner by chaining 2. Now I'm going to begin the width of this by putting another cluster right back into this corner so that I can build up the sides here. So I put a cluster of 3 double crochets right here at the top into this corner space right here. All right, then I put another cluster in between these clusters right here. All right, 3 double crochets right there. And now I'm going to make 3 double crochets into this corner for a total of 3 on this side, okay? Now that I'm done with this side right here, I'm going to turn it again so that I can make my corner for this side. I'm going to do that by chaining 2, and then I'm going to start building up the next side by putting 3 double crochets back into that corner space from the row before. Because before we chained 2 in between these 2, and now we're putting these clusters right into that chain 2 space, and next time we'll put 2 clusters into that chain 2 space, right? So next I'm going to go ahead and put a cluster of 3 double crochets in between each one of these granny clusters here. And I'm going to work across until I come to this corner, and then we can meet back up there. All right, see you there. Right, hi, welcome back. So I crocheted all the way across the length of this until I came to the corner, and I added one more cluster right there in that corner. Now I'm going to turn chain 2 to create that corner, and I'm going to go right back into that same corner, and I'm going to add a cluster so that I can finish off this side. So I'm going to double crochet 3 times into the corner again, but this time it's for the other side. All right, now I'm going to make 3 double crochets right here in between these two. Now I'm going to make 3 double crochets again into right here for this side, because I'm still building up the sides. And one way to make sure that you're putting enough clusters in is to look at the row before and count how many clusters there were. See, there were 3 there, or there were 2 there. Now there's 3 up here, okay? And there was 1 before. So now that I've made that 3rd cluster, I am going to chain 2 and turn, because now I'm working on the length again. So now I am going to go ahead and put another cluster right here by double crocheting 3 times. Right, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the top of that 2 chain from before. Okay, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to chain up 2 and then go back into this space right here and put 2 more double crochets into that to start my next round. And then I'll just go around, and I'll be mindful of every time I come to a corner that I am adding one, and then I'm doing my corner stitch, and then I'm adding another one to the next side. And you just keep doing that until you make a rectangle that is the size of the blanket side or fabric size that you want. All right, this is a really, really great way to make granny squares and granny square blankets that are rectangular. You can just keep going around and around, especially if it's a self-striping yarn or a Lion Brand mandala yarn, for example. It works up really, really beautiful with one color in the middle, and then it just starts radiating out. It's a really, really beautiful pattern, and it also it's really quick, and it's kind of mindless in that once you get down how to make it, you can just keep going around and around, and you don't have to really think that hard about it. There's no real counting involved. You just have to be mindful of when you're on a side and when you're in a corner, and it's not really that hard as long as you remember to think of it as sides and corners rather than just one side and then the next side, because those corners are really, really important. And I know it's like elementary school level of understanding, but we have to remember that to make a rectangle or to make a square, you need 4 sides and 4 corners. So that's how I remembered it when I was first starting out, because for some reason, for me personally, every time I got to that corner, I didn't know what to do. So now that I think about it that way, I always know what to do when I come to those corners. And I mean, it works up really pretty. It looks really elegant. And you don't have to join at the end. You don't have to join all those rectangles or all those squares at the end the way that you would if you were making a granny square blanket. So it's a nice way to avoid having to do those joins. And it's also just a beautiful way to make a blanket. So there's one last blanket stitch using the granny square that I want to teach people who view my channel, and that is the granny what's it called? The granny stripe stitch, where you make a granny square across and then on the next row, so you work it in rows instead of in rounds, and it's the same idea as making a granny square or making a granny rectangle, but it's just another way to make a blanket and not have to join. So you be looking for that. Another way that I have seen people make granny rectangles, and this is just something to keep in mind. Oh, I can't find my other traditional. Okay, we're gonna go non-traditional here. Is that they will make 2 squares and then seam them together, all right, and then they'll start making their granny rectangle from that. Now that's another way that you can do that, starting with a rectangle, and then you only have to seam together 1. So that is just as legitimate as doing it the other way. Just wanted to go ahead and tell you that as well. If this isn't working out for you, that might be another way to do it. All right, but you're still going to have to go around making the clusters the way that you make the clusters, and making making those corners every single time you go around. So this is just a way to avoid having to seam it all. I hope you enjoyed my tutorial. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Please let me know if I was clear, and if you found this easy to follow. I really appreciate feedback like that, because it lets me know what I need to do to improve, or if I'm doing a good job. All right. So I really appreciate that. As always, I really appreciate all of your comments, your likes, your subscriptions, the fact that you guys are supporting me so much. I really, really appreciate that. And I just wanted to let you guys know that each and every one of you means a lot to me. So thank you so much for joining me on my channel. I really have enjoyed it. So I will see you soon with another tutorial.